Hello and welcome to CX Talks, Elevate EX for CX Success. The employee experience, or EX, is closely linked to the customer experience. But when it comes to employee engagement and management, the last 3 years have brought new challenges for CX leaders. In many industries and locations, attrition remains higher than many would like it to be, and there are labour shortages too. As a result, customer satisfaction is in decline. To put a number on the employee impact of this situation, in March 2023, CMP research said that 42% of customer contact agents are not satisfied in their current role. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, we are going to assess how CX leaders can address these issues in their teams. And to provide the required expertise, we are joined by BT's Principal Innovation Partner, Dr Nicola Millard, and Claire Hill, who is a CX Network Advisory Board member and the Director of Customer Operations for Travel Counsellors. Dr. Millard will be sharing the research she has conducted on the employee experience, particularly in contact centres, while Claire will be bringing her director-level experience to the discussion, explaining the realities of addressing engagement for employees and other stakeholders. A warm welcome to both our speakers and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
To kickstart the conversation, I would like both of you to tell us about the current state of EX in customer-facing departments and the things that are happening in your respective organisations. Nicola, perhaps we can go to you first.
Well, I always say that to start with EX, we probably need to also look at the CX bit because that kind of has a huge impact. And we've just got a brand spanking new piece of customer research around the customer experience and how customers are perceiving it. And I think it's an interesting one. You mentioned that customer satisfaction has gone down. I think that's also that the pandemic hasn't necessarily brought customer expectations down remotely. I think we've been talking about the pandemic changing absolutely everything. In terms of customers, certainly expectation of service has not gone down one iota. In fact, it has remained pretty static over pretty much the 10 years of the research that we've been doing on customers. So I think the first thing is that customers do expect an awful lot from frontline employees and contact center agents. I think we've got other challenges that are based around some of the things that are going on in the industry as well. So increased amounts of automation. That's an interesting one because what automation does is it takes away all of the simple and transactional stuff, which leaves our frontline people with all of the really complex and emotive stuff. And that for them is actually a lot more difficult. And I think we're seeing that in terms of, for example, most of our customers. So I work with mostly large corporates. So I'm in the BT business side of the business. So what we're seeing across the board typically is if we look at the phone, for example, the phone tends to be used as a channel for a customer in crisis. So they've got the really complex and the really emotive stuff. They've probably started on digital. They've tried to help themselves. They've tried to deal with the problem. They got frustrated. They've gone, okay, I'm going to ring them. So again, the pressure then is on the agent. So we're starting to see, particularly on the phone, less calls maybe in terms of the overall landscape, but longer calls and more complex calls and more emotive calls. So that places an enormous amount of pressure on the agents. To be honest, the agents have always been under that pressure. And I think over the past, again, 5-6 years, we're kind of at the bleeding edge of a lot of the automation stuff. And that does leave your agents with a really complex job to do. So I think the dilemma from the EX perspective is how do we make sure that those agents have got the support they need, the training they need, the knowledge they need, not just on the sort of factual knowledge side, but also do they have the emotional support that they need as well, because they are increasingly getting very difficult, maybe rude, maybe abusive customers coming in as well. Add that to a lot of the other EX changes that we're seeing, which have been caused by the pandemic. And to be honest, that's where we are seeing the change around things like work patterns, hybrid working, that kind of thing. We're in a new arena, I think, in terms of that employee piece, and employee expectations have maybe changed a tiny bit more than the customer has, because we were forced to rethink the ways that we work during the pandemic. And I think we're almost in a situation at the moment where the old world and the new world are clashing. So I think we firstly need to probably acknowledge that before the pandemic, EX wasn't going tickety-boo, that people weren't massively engaged and happy with their jobs. The pandemic changed things, and some things went really well and some things didn't go so well. But we're coming out of this, I think, in an interesting and exciting time. And we have an opportunity, I think, at the moment to rethink work. to make it work for 3 reasons for people. So we need to get that EX piece absolutely right. For productivity, we mustn't let productivity drop. Automation allegedly was going to massively improve productivity. It hasn't necessarily done that. And then I think that the third thing I'm looking at is how do we make it better for the planet as well? So people, productivity, and planet. How do we reinvent and re-engage employees to make the EX good? Because if you're not got a good EX, frankly, you're not going to get a good CX either. So the two are intimately connected in my book anyway.
I think from my perspective, seeing a very similar landscape to Dr. Millard. So we've obviously been through a very, very difficult time. You know, we've had COVID, we've had the year of the resignation. We've seen a falling away of colleagues who prefer not to work, who found their vocation elsewhere, and that has all had a real impact, I think, on the landscape. So I'm certainly sensing a higher appreciation amongst businesses of employee choice, but I'm also seeing, I think what has been alluded to in that clash of the old world and the new world. So it's very difficult from an employee perspective at the moment. That there's certainly a sense of more of a work hard, play hard culture. And there's a new term. It's a new term to me. I work in the travel industry now, and a new term to me is the word bleisure. So combining work with holidays or after work events. So there's kind of less definition between the work-life balance than what we used to have, and it's how we embrace that and how we ensure that we are providing the flexibility to enable that a little bit more, because experiences have changed so much over the last 3 years. To ignore that would be at our folly. I think that the cost of living crisis is also something that's having a big impact on employee experience, because money is very hard earned and spent more cautiously. And I think, again, in the travel industry, we're seeing that real appreciation of experiences as opposed to product. So it's how do we weave all of that in and ensure that we're still delivering the same levels of satisfaction to employees who have higher levels of expectation, with customers who have a higher level of expectation, whilst maintaining our own expectations from a business perspective, and ensuring that, you know, we are keeping retention, lifetime value of a customer and lifetime value of an employee at the very forefront of our thinking. So it is a difficult landscape to navigate at the moment, that's for sure.
Well, thank you for setting the scene there. We've really got a huge issue on our hands then in terms of where CX sits and how leaders can manage the current situation. So let's look at how CX leaders can improve the experiences for their employees and hopefully reduce attrition and promote those other business benefits that we've highlighted there. We've had an ongoing debate, as both of you have referenced, about hybrid and remote work versus on-site work. We've had recent research about the realities of a 4-day working week. There's a lot of talk about what can be done here, but when it comes to CX leaders motivating and engaging their customer-facing employees, what do you believe to be the most successful approaches? Claire, we'll go to you first this time.
Sure. I think from my perspective, and again, talking from personal experience, we have overcome extreme, we have overcome extreme adversity. The travel industry has really been through the mill. And one of the things that's been really important to us is remaining solid in our commitment to care more than anybody else. So that is certainly a phrase that is used a lot around the business. Sorry, I'm going to have to cough. Excuse me. So I'll just repeat that. So remaining solid in our commitment to employees and customers to care more than anybody else is really important. So doing the right thing, being transparent, throughout COVID, taking the losses, but whilst we're taking the losses, knowing that we're earning the trust, both of our customers and of our colleagues. So reputation was really important to us throughout that whole point, and I think that has served as well. But also internally, that internal reputation from a colleague perspective, the it's created a strong foundation for our colleagues to build on, and that trust, I think, has become really, really important. So knowing that we say what we will do, even in the times when the going gets tough, I think that has been a real good backdrop for us, a real good foundation for us. Successful approaches. So sharing accountability has been something that has been very important for us right from the very start. So collaborating in the design of our strategy, defining our goals, collaborating on objectives and KPIs so that everybody feels they are part of the organisation and part of moving forward, and ensuring that colleagues have skin in the game. So we have a bonus based on company performance, and I've seen that in a lot of businesses, and I think it is a well-trodden path. But I think what is really important is understanding how that translates into their own objectives. So being very clear, if we're talking about profitability being the company goal, how I contribute to that, how that is broken down, and how I contribute that, so I can be absolutely clear. And we have a bit of a mantra around clarity is kindness. And ensuring that clarity is driven through everything we do, so that everybody knows how they contribute to the strategic objectives that they've helped to define. And then building the engagement plans together, so a real theme of collaboration here, and talking through those survey results so that they're part of the action planning going forward. And having that transparency our plan. So we talk about scaling with intimacy, so leveraging technology and being very transparent about how we do that, and creating that culture of continuous improvement, so that our colleagues feel empowered to resolve and empowered to contribute to the future. And I think something that's really important, because we can all focus on our silos and focus on what we do within our own functional areas as a business. But something that's been very important from our perspective is to look company-wide at those cross-functional accountabilities as well, so that we have those mature relationships that are all working to the same goal. So if our goal is to provide a frictionless experience for our customers, then having that just coming into our customer service function when we need the expertise from one of our other areas isn't going to work. So having those mature dependencies with service levels, we want to respond to our customers within a certain time, so you have to respond to us within a certain time, and making sure that is driven across the organisation has really been important and helpful to our colleagues within customer services, because they don't think they're in it on their own. They know that the whole business is striving to the same end. And I think it's something that Dr Millard mentioned before, but avoiding the us and them friction between a colleague and a customer. So we are addressing poor customer behaviours so that our colleagues do feel supported. It's not just a case of customer is king and anything goes, and you will deal with the consequences of that. There is a real focus on we are all in it together. There is a mutual respect. And if that mutual respect is broken by one party or the other, then we will address that. And I think colleagues feel much more supported when we're addressing those behaviours with our customers. And then again, something that Dr Millard mentioned, so there's a lot of synergies across the conversations. It's having the tools that are disposable to ensure that we are focusing on well-being as well. So flexibility to respond to individual circumstances is really important, and bringing that well-being into the open, having those group discussions, and normalising what would have previously been seen as exceptional circumstances. So it's not by exception anymore. It's every individual is their own exception, and ensuring that view around flexibility and support, and ensuring that that support is really felt. And again, the mantra of caring more than anybody else, that caring goes to our well-being as well. So it's making sure all of that is inbuilt into the fabric of how we operate as a business. And then I think finally, just the last point from me on this is being very clear around what career progression opportunities exists, both within our own function and externally, so that we are continuing to invest in leadership, invest in development, and being very clear with all our colleagues that there are opportunities for them to progress their careers within the business, but also support our colleagues if they choose to go outside of the business, because our caring shouldn't stop just because they no longer want to be part of Travel Counsellors. We want to continue that approach throughout. And I think that really plays to the authenticity. We're not just authentic when you're in the business. We want to maintain those relationships as you go onwards and upwards with your careers.
That's a really interesting answer, Claire, because you've hit on a lot of the solutions that others do talk about, and it comes back to purpose, it comes back to that well-being, the backup, things like that. But you also mentioned there about communicating with your employees. So how do you communicate these benefits with them, and how do they respond?
There is a regular, we call them town halls. There's a regular town hall where we get everybody together, and that is driven from the top. So our CEO stands in front of everybody, and we've got loads of laptops around because there are some people working from home, but he, right from the start, creates a backdrop where we're communicating, we're being transparent, we're being very open. In our last session, he was very clear about this is what we're aiming towards as a business. We have a growth plan, and we want to ensure that everybody understands what that looks like and what that means to you. And he's creating an open door policy. So he's very non-hierarchical, creating that open door policy so anybody can ask any questions of anybody on the leadership team, including himself. So already, right from the start, right from the very beginning, you have that open door from a communication perspective. And then that role modeling is then cascaded down to the leadership team, to the people leaders within the organization who are seeing that demonstrated clearly, and then ensuring that they're having those similar conversations from a level with their own teams. And I think there's so many tools at our disposal now, isn't there? The Teams, the Zoom, etc., and bringing people together on that is something that we do on a regular basis. So there's a real clarity of purpose right from the top and right from the leadership team that flows all the way through the organisation, and using that technology and those tools to ensure that collaboration is understood and used across the piece.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Claire. Nicola, same question to you now.
Yeah, well, my PhD was on motivation in the contact centre, and I have to say everything that Claire just said hit the mark in terms of what people tend to lack at in terms of what's a good job. And sure, salary does play a big part in that, but it's not the be all and end all. And certainly at the moment, with the economic pressures that we're all under, it does become more important. And I keep saying, given our agents are having a much more difficult job to do because they're getting the complex and emotive stuff, pay might be one of those things that we might want to look at, and particularly if we're looking at, I mean, it's often regarded as an entry-level job. I've never thought it was, but it's often regarded as you know, the job that a young person might come in as their first job in their career. And I think now, because of that complexity and emotiveness, I think it takes if you're a teenager, for example, it takes some talent to be resilient enough to take those kind of calls. So I think, you know, firstly, we probably need to think about who we recruit, and obviously recruitment is a big problem. The work that we've done really around you know, how work's changing, particularly, I mean, we've been doing quite a lot around how work generally is changing, but we've done a deeper dive on the contact centre because, again, it's kind of, I'm a bit geeky about contact centres, and I think I mean, we did some research during sort of lockdowns where we detected that, particularly in the UK, that agents were often struggling a bit. There were a few reasons for that. Again, we tend to recruit young in this industry, and we know that younger people potentially struggle during particularly lockdowns because I keep saying successful home working starts with the home. So, you know, if you're in a shared space, you're competing for space, you're competing for bandwidth, or you've got small children at home. All of those things are not necessarily conducive to being able to effectively work. And we saw all sorts of pressures, certainly during lockdowns, particularly during the extreme of the lockdown with things like homeschooling, where if people were not given the flexibility to take some time to school their kids, their only choice was to quit. And that's where we saw a very big proportion of the workforce starting to fall out because they simply weren't given that flexibility. So, I mean, you mentioned the 4-day work week trials. I mean, that's come out of this healthy debate that we're all having, I think, around how we change the ways that we work. I think the UK obviously just ran a very interesting 6-month trial of which I think 92% of the companies said that they would continue on with the 4-day work week. But it's interesting that the ones that were customer facing struggled a little bit more, because traditionally, if you're looking at 4-day work week, you're looking at a 3-day weekend. So normally you would take either a Monday or a Friday off. If you're in a customer service or if you're in a contact center, guess when your busiest days are? A Monday and a Friday. So that's probably not the option. So I think actually when I looked at the data, particularly on contact centers in the trial, they actually did struggle. They had to hire extra staff. So it might not be the answer, but again, coming out of the learning from the pandemic, I think we did see some quite interesting stuff around providing a little bit more flexibility, not just in where you work, but when you work. So there's obviously been a lot of discussion around where you work, and home working. For me, I mean, in the contact center industry, I was one of my first jobs in BT actually back in 1992. Obviously, I was only 6 at the time, but was our first home working trial, and I think it was one of Europe's first home working trial, and we worked contact center agents from home, and I was part of I'm a psychologist, so I was part of the psychological monitoring team for that, because we were worried that they were going to go, mad and struggle. And actually, they had their ups and downs, but it kind of echoed almost what we saw during lockdowns, in that, there were difficult times, but there were also some easy times. I think since we've come out of that dark period, I think most people are saying they want a little bit more flexibility. They want that choice around how, when, and where they work. So in terms of where they work, I think most people are saying they don't necessarily want to work from home 5 days a week, but they do want choices in terms of when they come into the office. But if they do make that journey, and obviously, again, there's an economic cost to that, they've got to, if they're going to come into the contact center, they probably want to see people that they work with, people in their team. So there needs to be some kind of higher level negotiation of when other people are in, because that's a support network in itself. But we were seeing things like time bartering. But we were seeing things like time bartering and payback schemes going on, particularly during the pandemic, where people life happens. If you're trying to balance your life and the rest of everything you need to do in terms of work, could we maybe trade shifts? If we need to leave an hour early, can we make that up? And obviously the beauty of things like home working, which we'd seen way before the pandemic, was you can start to split the shifts because there's not a commute to go in. So again, if you've got peak calls early in the morning and late at night. That might be ideal for a parent, for example. You drop your kids off, you can do a couple of hours in the morning. When the kids are in bed, you can do a little bit more. So that offers a flexibility of work that maybe would entice people that couldn't necessarily do a commute in a 9 to 5. I would also include people with disabilities in that as well. But I think in terms of the research we did my lovely research colleagues in BT did a fantastic longitudinal piece of research over a year, where they interviewed agents and managers and tried to sort of figure out how they were coping with the pandemic and what they'd learned. And I think, well, firstly, from a management perspective, it was quite interesting, because the interviews they did, initially, a lot of the managers were going, no, we want everyone back in the contact center because it's easy to manage. I always say, good management is, making sure your team's okay, managing by walking around. If you can see tears, you can give people a hug if they're having a hard day. In a hybrid model, that's much, much harder to do. So they wanted them back for a reason, but actually after a year of managing probably fully remote teams in most cases, they were going, actually, no, we understand how to do it remotely now. We figured that out. Their anxiety was then around, how do we manage that split team? So if half the people are in the contact center and half the people at home, that's again an additional level of complexity that maybe we need to support them around doing. And then there was worries about proximity biases. Would they favor people that were co-located with them? Particularly if your agents come in on the same day as you do, you're only going to see them. So again, could that cause biases around promotion and bonus and that kind of thing? So there were a lot of anxieties, I think, even just on the management level there. From the agent perspective, I think a lot of it was about what I termed, certainly in my PhD, communities of coping, because again, that complexity and emotiveness. If you've got an emotive call or a complex call and you're in the contact center, you can spin a chair around and scream across the center going, well, does anyone know about this? And they can see the tears. You can start to put communities of coping in remotely as well. So again, those proximity bias shouldn't just be of people in the contact center. And there are lots of tools to do that, as Claire said, so how do we use those tools? So the tools are there. I think the other thing is needs to go hand in hand with a culture that you need to be able to admit that you're struggling. You need to admit that you just had an abusive call. You need to admit that you're not necessarily in the right frame of mind to maybe continue on with what might be a barrage of abusive and emotive calls. So that's again a management challenge. How do you build that relationship with your agents so that they will admit that without the fear of being punished? So I think there's a lot of things that we've learned that we need to kind of continue sort of learning and thinking about. But this is kind of almost a time of experimentation. And as I said, I think we have an opportunity to maybe rethink a lot of these things in the favour of both employee and employer, to be frank.
That's fascinating, Nicola. And a kind of underlying theme there is obviously the change that's been happening, and change itself requires management. So how would you maybe, advise people on that change management angle?
I mean, I think it is around an experimental mindset. Some things don't work, like that 4-day work week doesn't work for everybody, but it's worth trying it. It's worth trying things, I think, and if it fails, that's not a failure, actually. I mean, I'm in innovation, so we fail most of the time, to be perfectly honest. But if you fail and learn, then get it right. I think that's the big thing. I think this industry, having worked in the contact center industry for a long time, is quite risk averse sometimes. And again, it's and understandably so, because you're handling very sensitive things like customer data and the customer and brand experience. But don't feel so risk averse that you can't think, well, could we do this better? And let's make sure that if we get it wrong, let's get it right the next time. The story I always tell, I ages ago, I went out to Southwest Airlines, and one of the baggage handlers had come up with a new way of checking people in and doing baggage. So they made a suggestion, they changed the way they did it. It went horribly and disastrously wrong, but that person got promoted. because they learn how not to do it. So, and they put in a much better way of doing it as a result. So I think that's the case. Listen to your agents. They know the customers better than anybody else. Listen to your agents, make those changes. If they don't work, learn. But and involve your agents, as Claire was saying earlier. If you involve them with a lot of this change, they become a lot less resistant because they're party to that change. They're actually involved with it. They have autonomy and an opinion, so that it's not being imposed upon them. So I would absolutely say, involve your agents, bring them along on the journey, create that sense of purpose, create that sense of experimentation, and then hopefully, the change isn't quite as painful.
It's changing the language as well about feeling empowered to fail, not just empowered to progress. Because failure is considered something that is meant to be very bad and discouraged, and actually it is the only way we're going to move forward.
Okay, well, Claire, let's come to you next, because you mentioned scaling with intimacy earlier. How do you achieve that and then bring the customers and colleagues along with you?
Yeah, it's a great phase, and that was my exam question at interview stage. How do you scale with intimacy? So just to give you a bit of a backdrop on that. So we have a very ambitious growth target, and our customer base is growing rapidly. Our success, however, is built on redefining what personal means in travel. That is our vision. And I've talked before about caring more than anyone else. So the exam question or the interview question was, how do you scale to be £1 billion business and retain that personal touch that has previously defined us? So I think from our customer perspective, which in fact is our travel counsellors, that definition of personal was always being able to pick up the phone to you. So that's what personal means to us. We want to be able to pick up the phone to you. So how do we resolve that tension of we can't always be there to pick up the phone to you, or else we would have to build multiple contact centres to enable that, with that expectation. And obviously the answer is technology. We've talked about it before. It's technology, and it's using the community through that technology. So we're scaling with intimacy, and we are going back to our customers to say the way we are doing this is doing this again in collaboration with you to make your role, your job much more easier. So we work on a franchise-based business, so our customers are actually travel counsellors. So they go out to the end customer. So what we're doing with our travel counsellors who expect real intimacy from us is saying to them, we're going to give you all the tools that you need to empower you to grow your business without needing to contact us. And that doesn't mean you have to self-serve everything, and we're giving you complete autonomy without being there to support you. It means we will look to automate, we will look to make your life easier, we will look to optimize your productivity by reviewing the processes that you follow and look at ways of working. So the answer has to be technology, but we're also very keen on, and this analogy can be translated to customers as well as travel counsellors, but using the community. So not only are you asking questions of your community and getting answers from the community, but you're building those relationships with the community, and there's a greater sense of belonging when it comes to that as well. And then from a contact center perspective, so within our own operations team, again, it's really important that they're part of that journey with us, and they don't see this as, what does this mean for me? I no longer have a job in the future, because this is about them dealing with the, and Nicola, you mentioned it, more complex type queries, which can be more difficult, but they're actually provide much more job satisfaction than the actual transactional issues they've been dealing with. And the way we want to make it more personal is by being very clear about what that means. So we've got an ops charter, and we talk about taking ownership, being very transparent about prioritization, because we have a ticketing system and we prioritize based on when the end customer is traveling. So being very clear about that. We also want to be able to channel switch when it's appropriate. So if we are seeing emails or tickets coming in, or we're seeing chats coming in, and there's confusion, or we can sense frustration, or there's an issue that we know if we get into this, there's going to be loads of toing and throwing backwards and forwards. Pick up the phone and make that outbound call, and resolve that with that level of personal touch that we talk about. And it's about having great conversations. So whether those great conversations are on the phone, or whether those great conversations are via, chat, or whatever that may be, it's having those great personal conversations. And a good CRM system is obviously very useful in terms of building those great conversations.
Excellent, thank you, Claire. Well, we're coming to the end of the session today, so I think it would be a great opportunity for you both to kind of summarise the points that we've made today. Obviously, we've had a lot of focus on the importance of community as well as communication, and that relationship management piece as well. There's a clear theme here that people want to work with people, and there's a lot of opportunity here when it comes to improving employee experiences, and hopefully tackling those retention issues that we have seen across the customer experience space. So Nicola, perhaps to you first for closing comments.
As I said, I think we're in an exciting time. We clearly have a very demanding customer who is absolutely, demanding more across all channels. All of our frontline employees are under increasing pressure. We mustn't forget, humans like talking to humans, particularly when it does come to that complex and emotive stuff. And because I think the march of automation comes on, we've got, a lot of hype about things like ChatGPT at the moment. That takes away the transactional stuff pretty well, actually, but it doesn't take away everything, and it does magnify the pressures that are on our front line. So we mustn't forget, how do we support them? How do we make sure that they're engaged and they have everything they need to do their tools, plus that autonomy, that trust, that choice, that purpose that actually gets them out of bed in the morning. So yeah, I think we're just in a really interesting period at the moment.
It is totally. I call it the embedding period. So the post-COVID, everything we learned, because a lot of good things came out of COVID in terms of different ways of working, increased flexibility. Everything we learned is starting to embed now, and we're really starting to see that work for our employees. And I think we just need to continue with that. And I think just to echo what Nicola said before around sense of purpose. So that purpose translating not only to our customers, because I think everybody, every good business has a purpose that is very focused on the customer, but ensuring that that purpose is consistent with our employees as well is really important. So if you're talking about being a caring community, then you're caring about your employees as much as you're caring about your customers, and ensuring that translates through everything you do.
Fantastic. Huge thanks, Claire and Nicola, for joining us today. Loved everything you talked about, and yeah, we are in a change. We're in a times of change. So watch this space.
Thank you very much. Great talking to you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.